You ever considered changing a behaviour but didn't know where to start? There is an array of behaviour modification methods available that can help you increase a desired behaviour or decrease a problematic one from the comfort of your own home. I'm Jess, a psychology student at the University of New England, and today I will be explaining how you can overcome a phobia using gradual exposure therapy. Phobias may seem irrational or silly to the people around you, but they can significantly impact your day-to-day life. They can cause you to avoid certain situations, places, or people, and depending on the severity and type of phobia that you experience, they can even affect your relationships and career. Although the premise of this method is to face your fears, it is not as scary and as extreme as it sounds. You don't have to lock yourself in a room with a spider or throw yourself out of a plane strapped to a parachute, I promise. Instead, you can gradually expose yourself to your phobia through a range of predetermined situations that elicit varying levels of fear. Presumably, you are already experiencing some anxiety at the thought of being exposed to the thing that terrifies you the most. And you're probably looking for some reasons as to why you shouldn't engage in exposure therapy. So let me tell you why you should. Science continually tells us that exposure therapy is the most effective behavior modification method for decreasing anxiety-related fears, such as phobias. The idea of exposure therapy is to provide contradictory evidence for your existing fear response. Your phobia exists due to previous beliefs or experiences that have caused overwhelming fear and anxiety in response to a non-threatening stimulus, such as flying, heights, or public speaking. This external stimulus can cause severe anxiety and fear, resulting in rapid breathing, increased heart rate, dizziness, or nausea. In response to this distressing autonomic arousal triggered by a fear, we often develop avoidant behaviors that decrease these negative feelings quickly. Utilizing these behaviors to escape or avoid your anxiety may help in the moment, but they actually strengthen your fear response in the long run. This coping method not only confirms that the feared stimulus is a threat and should be avoided, but it also demonstrates that the only way to alleviate these distressing feelings is to avoid or escape them. In turn, we learn to continually use these behaviors to overcome our fears rather than facing them. Comparatively, when you confront the feared stimulus without avoidance or escape behaviors, your anxiety decreases on its own over time. This provides new evidence to support the notion that the stimulus is not a real threat and that the unpleasant feelings can in fact decrease on their own. Exposure therapy allows you to challenge the existing beliefs, experiences, and methods employed to cope with the intense fear so that you can change them. Now that you are convinced that exposure therapy is the best behavior modification technique available, let's discuss setting your desired goal or outcome. Your goal should be specific, measurable, and achievable. For instance, if you're afraid of flying, your goal could be to fly without using alcohol or medication, or to be relaxed enough during takeoff that you can read a book. Setting a vague goal, such as to no longer be scared of flying, is difficult to measure and can therefore impact the success of your efforts. Considering the intensity of your existing fear, this extreme type of goal can also seem unachievable and affect your motivation. Once you have set your goal, write this down. It can also be helpful to tell your family and friends about your goal to create accountability and support through your journey. The next step is to plan how you will reach your goal. This is where the gradual component of your exposure therapy comes in. For the best results, it is suggested that you expose yourself to your phobia gradually, starting with the aspect of your fear that produces the least anxiety. In fear of flying, you may feel completely at ease when you are talking about flying for an upcoming trip, but once you have booked the flights and the trip is approaching, your anxiety could increase. You may find that the takeoff only causes moderate fear, whilst landing is unbearable. Each of these scenarios can be incorporated into your hierarchy of fear, or subjective units of distress scale, SUDS for short. A SUDS is generally comprised of 10 fear-inducing situations that relate to your phobia. They are ranked from 0, completely relaxed, to 100, highest level of anxiety, and increase by 10 points per item. Once you have created your SUDS, write down each item with the corresponding distress level so you can begin exposing yourself to these situations. Now that you have a clear goal and have developed your SUDS, you can begin to gradually expose yourself to your fear. There are a number of different exposure methods that are proven to be effective in diminishing anxiety and overcoming phobias. The most effective method is in vivo or real-life exposure. Despite its effectiveness, in vivo exposure therapy can be logistically and financially difficult to access, especially for phobias such as fear of flying. This has led to the use of virtual reality exposure therapy, which has been shown to be just as effective as in vivo, if not more, and is a great alternative or first step in your behaviour modification journey. If you can't get your hands on a VR headset, you can simply make your own using some cardboard and a smartphone. Regardless of which method you use, for best results, exposure should be gradual, prolonged, and repetitive. You should aim to maintain exposure until your anxiety has decreased by around 50%. This should then be repeated multiple times to provide reinforcement that your anxiety decreases over time when you expose yourself to your feared stimulus. Once you have demonstrated that you can continually remain in this situation long enough to feel your distress levels decrease, you can move on to the next situation outlined in your SUDS. These steps can then be repeated for each stage of the SUDS until you've exposed yourself to all 10 stages, including your most feared situation. It is also beneficial to note down your level of anxiety before and after each exposure trial. By comparing the two scores, you can determine how much your anxiety is decreased in response to your feared stimulus as a result of the exposure therapy. Once you've successfully remained in each stage of the SUDS and significantly decreased your anxiety and fear response without avoidant behaviours, it is important to continually expose yourself to the feared stimulus to maintain the approach behaviours you have now learned. Lastly, remember to be kind to yourself. Fear can be very intense and uncomfortable, and we are quite literally programmed to run from danger. Feeling overwhelming fear and anxiety and deciding to stay in the presence of the perceived danger can be very difficult and should be commended. Learning to respond to your phobia differently is a brave and worthwhile challenge that you can 100% achieve if you allow yourself to. Good luck.